Welcome back everybody, MC here with another video, and today I want to show you guys in what order to do the bosses in Terraria. And I'm using a tier list for this because it's the easiest way to show you how to do this without having to fight every single boss in one video. Let's get started. So the first boss that you will fight in Terraria will either be the King Slime or the Eye of Cthulhu. Technically, I have all these in order already, so if you already know the sprites off by heart, you could probably do this without having to wait for me to go through them. And it's pretty much whichever one spawns first, really. I a lot of the time do the Eye of Cthulhu first, because King Slime just hasn't spawned and I can't find any rubies. But it makes no difference which one you start off with. You can have either of these and they're both not that difficult, especially if you're brand new to the game and you're playing on classic mode. Then you will be fighting the Brain of Cthulhu or the Eater of the Worlds. And the Brain of Cthulhu, Eater of the Worlds are pretty much whichever world you're in. If you're in Crimson, you'll fight the Brain of Cthulhu. And if you're in the Corruption, you'll find Eater of the Worlds. And pretty much the way to spawn them is go to their respective biome and destroy 3 of their spawners. You can't really miss the spawners. You're going to need a hammer or you're going to need some dynamite to blow those up or to hit them. Then we have Queen Bee, and Queen Bee is an optional boss that you can get some really good items for, especially to fight the next boss. Found in the jungle, hit one of the hives, be careful, very easy to spawn by accident, and she can kill very quickly if you're not prepared. Then we have Skeletron. Skeletron is one of the more difficult bosses because of the area that you fight him in terms of you're going to be very squishy and he does a lot of damage. But as long as you have plenty of dodge, you can take him on pretty easily. And he will open up the dungeon for you, so you'll be able to go into the dungeon and start farming for some new, very important items. Just talk to the man that's standing outside the dungeon at nighttime, and best of luck. Then we have the Wall of Cthulhu. Wall of Cthulhu is spawned in Hell by dropping the voodoo doll into the lava, and it'll move from all the way from one side of the map to the other. So pretty much try and start the fight as close to the edge of the map as possible, and then just start working your way back. In classic mode, you're not going to have to start at the very edge of the map. You can probably start a little bit to the left or right of center of spawn, so just keep that in mind. Now we're going to enter hard mode. Killing Wall of Flesh begins the hard mode, and in hard mode we're going to be taking on the mech bosses as our first boss, our first main boss, I should say. There's a few side bosses down here that you can see that I'm not going to be using today. I'm only going to be going as far as Moonlord. The rest of these are just extras that you can kind of learn when to fight them as you go. So we're in hard mode and we're fighting the mech bosses. I personally do the mech bosses in this order. I do the Destroyer, Skeletron Prime, and the Twins in this order. And to spawn them, you pretty much just go to the guide and put Souls of Night or Souls of Light into his recipe box to see how to make the spawner for these 3 things. And then obviously collect the ingredients, create the spawner, and then spawn them at nighttime. For Destroyer, if you're up nice and high, he's not that difficult. For this, I suppose, Skeletron Prime, if you're up nice and high, he's also not that difficult. And no matter where you are for the Twins, best of luck. It's going to be a difficult fight, and it'll be enjoyable. Trust me. I actually tell a lie at the beginning of this video because Queen Slime could probably be done just before or just after the mech bosses. You don't have to wait until post Planta to do Queen Slime, but she's not that important anyway. So regardless where you do that fight, it doesn't matter. But I would probably fight her just after the mech bosses personally. If she had something really important to drop, I'd probably fight her sooner. Then we fight Planta. Planta is the boss that stops a lot of people from finishing Terraria. The amount of people that I know who stopped playing because Planta was too difficult for them. You find her in the jungle, hit a bulb, and best of luck. You can do this. It's not that difficult. You just have to know how to dodge and have a nice good space to move around. And honestly, Planta is one of the more iconic bosses in the game for just stopping you from getting to the post-Plantera section. And once we defeat the Plantera, we will enter post-Plantera section. Then we have Golem. Technically, Golem is necessary to kill to progress the world. In a way, it's actually more important to kill Golem than it is to kill Plantera. But I'm still going to call it post-Plantera because Golem is just very simple. You go in, you kill him, and it advances your world slightly. And yeah, you won't have any trouble with Golem. If you do, I'd be very surprised. The only problem with Golem is the size of his arena. And you go to the Lizard Temple, which you get the key for from Plantera, in order to kill Golem. Then you have some optional bosses to do. You can do these in any order, and you can actually skip them as well. You don't need to do these. So I would actually say, once again, I have put these in slightly the wrong order. I think maybe even more than slightly the wrong order, because I prefer to do Martian Madness next. You do that by going to the edge of the map and getting spotted by one of the UFOs. Don't kill the UFO by accident and just get scanned. This is completely optional. You don't have to do it if you don't want to in your playthrough, but it drops some pretty cool items and it's a pretty good event as well. I'd recommend doing it. Then we have Empress of Light. Not necessary to complete the game, but definitely worth the fight just because it's such a cool fight. She's a really cool enemy as well. I'd recommend fighting her at nighttime if you want to have a chance of surviving, especially at this stage of the game. If you want to fight her at daytime, fight her after Moonlord, but you're going to have to do some research into that anyway. Then we have Dookie, who's another optional boss. You don't have to fight him. I recommend fighting this thing after the Empress of Light and get the drops. It's very good drops that he provides, but he is a pain in the ass to fight, so I usually skip him, and he's not usually necessary in your playthrough. You can get all of the items to complete all of the other bosses without him. One of the reasons why he's a pain in the ass is because the spawner for him is quite rare. You have to get a truffle worm, and you have to fish with the truffle worm in the ocean to spawn him. You're going to have to look up a YouTube video on how to do that, and I'll have one of those for you in the future as well if you're interested in watching one of our videos for it. Then the necessary boss that you will have to fight is the Cultists. The Cultists allow you to spawn the pillars, which we're not going to place. The Cultist represents the pillars as well. You kill the Cultist, and you kill the pillars in order to finish the game, which is to kill Moonlord. More on him in a second. When it comes to the Cultists, not that difficult of a fight if you know what you're doing. And in general, even if you don't know what you're doing, you probably will survive, honestly. The Cultists will be found at the entrance to the dungeon, and you just have to kill them. Kill the little cultists that are standing there to spawn the main cultist. The last boss of the game is Moonlord. Moonlord will provide you with endgame credits, and there is only really one or two things you can do after Moonlord that are worth doing. So this is pretty much the end of your playthrough, unless you decide to go after Empress of Light daytime. Moonlord is a boss that is spawned as soon as you kill the 4 pillars after killing the cultist. It'll spawn automatically. Be ready and have a nice flat surface to move left and right on to fight the boss pretty much. He's not that difficult, but he is a bit of a long fight, so be ready for a bit of a slog. And one of the worst things about Moonlord is if you do die against him, it takes ages to respawn him if you don't want to use up your resources. So best of luck. It might take you a couple of goes, and don't worry too much. The more times you kill the pillars, the more resources you gain, which means you can turn those into weapons, armor, and you can actually make spawners for Moonlord as well. So that is pretty much it. Thank you very much for watching today's video. Just to be clear, if you guys are really early game, your first bosses are going to be King Slime, Eye of Cthulhu, Brain of Cthulhu or Eater of the Worlds, Queen Bee, and Skeletron. A lot of people struggle with this area of the game when they're brand new, and by the time they get to this area of the game, they've already looked up wikis, they've already looked up YouTube videos, so they kind of have a better grasp of how Terraria works. This is the opening area that is really going to matter to most of you. Let me know if you have any questions, let me know if I forgot anything, and best of luck in Terraria. It's a really, really good game. I think you will have a lot of fun with it. Thank you very much one last time, and ta-ta!